Racing through the night in an air evacuation plane is pretty routine for me by now. I've made this trip back to the States so often, in charge of a plane load of sick GIs. As an Air Force flight nurse, I'm solely responsible for their medical care during flight. Serious cases, like this boy on the Stryker frame, are flown home every week by the Air Force. I always have technicians to help me. We form a team that takes complete charge of the medical needs of the men. The miles rush by when you're traveling over 200 miles an hour. But the hours seem long when you're lying flat on your back. And part of our job is trying to keep up the spirits of the men on the journey. The trip is long, too, for the ambulatory patients sitting up front in the plane. Sometimes there's room for the wife and child of one of the servicemen who is traveling back with me on a stretcher. The pilot often comes back for a few words with the patients, and with me. Right now, he says we're about 20 minutes from base. Time to tuck everybody in. Soon we'll be home. They're thinking about it, too. Some will be rushed into the operating room. Others will begin tests and treatment that may last for months. I like sharing the Air Force task of getting the boys home quicker, getting them well sooner. The Air Force ambulance is the best welcome committee imaginable when the cabin doors open at last. During the few minutes it takes to set up unloading, I know how anxious my patients are for the moment they'll be carried off the plane. Passengers up front get off first. After the ambulatory patients disembark, the stretcher cases are carried out and down to the ambulance bus. I join them for the trip to base hospital, then get off first as the bus backs up to the ward entrance. I'm right there, too, to check over each man's medical record with a ward nurse as my patients are brought in. It's a highly coordinated procedure, receiving sick men from overseas or men flown in from outlying bases. And a highly coordinated medical team of the Air Force that is ready to receive them inside. The operating room nurse is ready and knows exactly what to expect and to do. The nurse anesthetist, too. Both these girls use their special training in the Air Force. My patients will have the best possible care. Another assignment is over, and I realize how glad I am to come back to my own room. Now for some rest. Well, I'm only on standby tomorrow. Maybe I won't even get a call. A whole day to myself. And do I need it? Remember when you started training for this job, Helen Bray? You were just a kid graduating from nursing school. Then passing state exams to become a registered nurse. I spent 2 years on my first job in a civilian hospital. This was my best training to be an Air Force nurse. Caring for all kinds of people and finding a specialty of my own, the orthopedic patients. Then the Air Force called for nurses, and I made the decision. All nurses, just like doctors, become commissioned officers. And we had indoctrination classes together. At my first lecture in aviation medicine, I learned the effects of altitude on the body, how long flights put pressure on weak organs, and how to recognize potential danger spots. Then we found out for ourselves in a pressure chamber. We learned the way altitude affects the heart and lungs. At low level, the action of a healthy heart is normal. Normal pressure in the lungs was illustrated by a balloon. As a plane goes up, oxygen thins out. Relative pressure inside the lungs increases. At 10,000 feet, the heart works faster. But in pressurized cabins with a continuous supply of oxygen, respiration and heart action is normal, and even the badly wounded can be safely moved by air. On my first assignment in the Air Force, I realized the difference between civilian and service nursing. At an Air Force hospital, everyone, even the patients themselves, belong to the same organization. My friend, Margaret Riley, expected me to stop by in the convalescent ward before going on my duty in the orthopedic clinic. Some of my old patients would soon be leaving the hospital. Margaret spent most of her time with patients who needed professional attention and let the techs, and the patients when they wanted to, do most of the routine work. My former patients would call out to me from across the ward. Like Airman Jimmy Lee, who shouted me over to his bed for a look at his new, smaller cast. Jimmy had been my patient just a few weeks ago, and I couldn't help feeling a little proud of his smile and the progress he was making. He had a real autograph collection on that leg, but I teased him because there was no room for my name. Jimmy really blushed as he turned over and showed me a whole side he'd reserved for his old nurse. When I arrived on duty with my orthopedic patients that night, I took a long look at them. Men fitted into traction beds and casts for weeks and months at a time. Some were sleeping. Others waited in that silent ward for medicine before they could sleep, or for a word or a smile from me. I admired these men of the Air Force who had the courage to lie and wait. Wait to get well so they could go back on duty or home. During the 2 years I'd spent on duty with the Air Force, the orthopedic ward had been my main duty station. And now I knew the guts it takes to hold on to life when every minute takes a year to pass. One boy really needed a sedative. Air Force men who fly and keep the planes in the air. Men who wait with courage under any circumstances. Suddenly, I wanted to share that part of it, too. I wanted to become a flight nurse. And here I am. I gave up my station in the orthopedic ward and went back to school to get my flight nurse's wings. Now I know how sick men feel after 13 hours in the air, how they react during flight when they're being rushed from outlying bases to an Air Force hospital. I'm glad I know this phase of the Air Force Medical Service. But right now I'm going to concentrate on a long sleep in my own bed and plans for tomorrow when I'll have some time to myself. Morning on an Air Force base. It's always busy, but somehow it seems busier when I'm not on regular duty. Nurses' quarters are near the field, and morning in our kitchen always finds someone trying to stretch those last minutes to include an extra cup of coffee before hurrying out on duty. But not me. Not today. I'm on standby. Outside, patients are boarding air evacuation planes that will take them out to hospitals nearer home for treatment. Sometimes I think the operations office is the busiest spot on the base in the morning. This is where all movement of patients is coordinated. When emergency flights come up, the standby flight crew is called. Well, there goes my day off. The head nurse wants me to be ready to take off in 20 minutes on a special trip to pick up a polio victim from an outlying base. It's funny. A special call like this never seems like an emergency when you know the way the Air Force medical team deals with it. We'll take off in the same routine way we would for a scheduled flight. Long before we return, the hospital will have the iron lung ready to receive the patient, who is protected by a portable respirator during flight. On trips like these, I always feel a little proud, because I know that one more serviceman will have a better chance to reach an Air Force hospital and the best medical care in the world, because I am there.